Well, guys, after watching this episode, it should be clear to everyone that Mr. Robot has done anything but jump the shark. Hey guys, it's Cameron from Mr. Robot, Season 2, Episode 10, Pr0cess.AXX, and holy shit, one episode. I mean, this episode was insane. It really was. I didn't think the show really could get crazier. I mean, I knew obviously it was going to go in some crazy directions, but not to the extent of what happens in this episode. Guys, I am at a loss for words of what happens next week. I mean, this episode was just insane. It really was. And damn did things get done here. I mean, people have been saying this season's really been slow. I think the payoff is going to be incredible. I really love this episode. This, for me, is tied with, I think, episode 7 as the best episode of the season. But let's just get into this episode because this was incredible. I absolutely love this episode. There's so much to talk about, and something I love about this episode is that it only really focused on everyone, but it only showed these characters when we really needed to. Like, it wasn't really a crowded episode. It focused mainly on one thing, but it showed the characters that we need to see, and I like the way that they did that. That's something that the season hasn't done the way the episode does. I think this is the first episode where we really do see everyone. I mean, most of the episodes this season, either Joanna's been absent or Price has been absent, and it's been understandable why you can't get to everyone in an episode, but this episode we do in fact get to everyone. We start off with probably, I think, the best scene I've seen Michael Christopher give on this show, because the beginning of this scene, it just tells us so much about his character. We see Price, who's with Colby, of all people, who I'm guessing was released from prison, and he gives him a copy of his new book and says it's his latest copy. He wanted to give it to him as a gift, and it's trending on Amazon. Starts to go on a rant about Trump and how he'd love to be in his position, and Price says that politics are for puppets, and if he did run for office, he'd be the last honest man, and he tells him that he needs him to see their thread Winston Campbell about the issue tonight, and he understands he still owes him some favors, and Colby says that he does a UN allowing China to annex the conduct, and Price says that Winston has the president's ear, and Colby says that he gets it, but it's a little out there, and he knows from reading the Times that China's got the tip of its dick in the Congo, and that basically, what I love about this scene is that Colby's telling him, look, you're not in power, you need to understand this, that China's the one in power, and by doing this, you're just going to give China more power. We know that the Dark Army pretty much is, you know, the victors right now. We'll get into that, though, because that's a big part of this episode. And he wants Winston to tell Obama to look the other way while China remains in power, to give them national sovereignty to another nation. It's just a little bit out there, and yeah, it definitely is. But Price says such an offer is a shit show. After climate change, there'll be a bunch of corpses raging a civil war. The Oval Office could spin in as a humanitarian experiment, and Colby says that it's bullshit, and says if he tells the ambassador to vote yes, Obama will forever be known as a man who gifted Africa to China. And Price says that that's the fine point. Obama just needs to tell ambassador to have Spain, and Colby says that he knows all of this has to do with his ambitions, and Price says this is for him, and he promises he won't forget his help. Colby asks if there's a pocket of the world he doesn't have his hand in, because he seems to be trading countries just left and right. I mean, it really doesn't seem like Price cares much, and Price asks if that's what history is all about, an imaginary line being drawn over and over again, and we get this great scene where we finally understand Price's motivation. I mean, we've seen it throughout the entire season, but we've never really known, like, oh yeah, that's totally Price's motivation, but we finally find out in this episode, in just this one little scene, and Colby says he has to know what he's doing for them, and Price says in his life, as he was making his way, he always wondered if he was the most powerful person in the room, and the answer always needed to be yes, even if it wasn't, keep in mind, and to this day, he still asks that question. The answer remains the same, and to everyone in the entire world, the answer is yes, with the exception of one or two, and that drives him, and he intends to leave a legacy, a standard of which was set by God, and anything less is not worth mentioning, and just that scene in general, I thought really summed up his character very well. You know, after that scene with White Rose, we definitely could tell he's a mercenary, but we can tell very well that Price wants to be the one in power. He wants to be, you know, he wants to be the president, he wants to be what the Dark Army are, he just wants to be the #1 man in power, and I think Price is definitely starting to unravel a bit, because I think he's slowly realizing that he's not the one in power. I mean, while he definitely is one of key figures, he is not the the key figure. And there's, like he said, there's one or two people. And we know that definitely one of those people is White Rose, but who could that second person be? That's something that we still don't know by the end of this episode, and I think that perfectly sets up how crazy this episode really is going to be, because really everyone just starts to unravel in this episode. This is the episode where everyone just starts to realize that, holy shit, shit's getting real, and that they're not going to be able to hide behind this mask anymore. And I love the way that was done here. I love that scene. It's the only scene we see of Price, but I think it told us everything we needed to. I think it gave us some motivation and really set up very well for the finale. So Joanna's then getting dressed, and Jesse tells her that he's still against this. There's no telling what conclusion he'll draw. She says if he had done with the job he was told to do, they wouldn't be here. Jesse says he's coming, which is when Joanna greets him, and that's basically... And I like the way we saw this. We couldn't tell it was in the car, but we saw it from their perspective. I thought it was really cool. I really did like that, and we haven't seen Joanna in a while. I think the last time we saw her was the prison reveal. That was the last time, and it seems that she's kicked Derek to the curb. Definitely it seems like we don't hear about him in this episode. We don't know what's going on with him. I am going to assume that she is replacing Elliot with Derek. That Derek was no use to her. She screwed Derek over. Derek's not going to forgive her for what she did, and that he's just of no use to her anymore. So she kicked him to the curb, and Elliot's back in, which is very interesting to see. And I really love the interplay between these two key figures in the episode, because I feel like it's something we have been building up to the entire season. I mean, we've seen all season that Joanna has been, very frenetic about where Tyrell is, just hoping that he's alive and doing whatever she can to get to Tyrell. And finally, it seems that I think she's realizing that she can't do this alone. I think even though she wants to, she can't. And that's something that's just incredible this episode. Even characters that are supposed to be villains, like Joanna and Price, are extremely vulnerable in this episode. They're just realizing that the power is not exactly in just their hands, and they need another set of hands to help them out, and Joanna realizes that in this scene. Because Elliot asks us why she isn't saying anything, and basically, I thought it was interesting that because right away she's just standing there saying nothing. Is she trying to get inside his head? He says he still feels like she can hear them, and Mr. Robot says that he feels like she can see him, and Joanna says he's not going anywhere. She says she knows he's been working with Tyrell, and he is to tell her where he is. So we very quickly realize that Joanna doesn't know where Tyrell is. I thought she did, but she doesn't, and I thought it honestly went in a more interesting direction. At first it was like, oh, that's disappointing, but then where this went, I thought was a lot more interesting than I think it could have been. And Ellie says he doesn't know and can't help her. She says that he's being honest this time, but he's going to find him for her. And Mr. Robot says no one's going to find him. He doesn't think he'll be able to do that, and she says that he's back to lying. He asks us if he should tell her the truth, that her husband is dead, and Mr. Robot says if he does that, then he can guarantee they will not make out of there alive, which... obviously, if she finds out, she's gonna kill them. I mean, we know how powerful Joanna can be, but like I said, she's just not as powerful as she thinks she is, and she tells him about this really crazy scene about her first date with Tyrell, where she literally saw this other redhead woman wearing a pair of cubic zirconia earrings, and she asked him what he'd do to get it, and he replied whatever was necessary. She said she told him she wanted him to fuck the woman. I'm not even kidding. She literally said have sex with the woman and bring her the earrings, and she woke up to a gift and now is wearing them, and they're now her favorite pair she owns. Now, how fucked up is that? I mean, that is insane that we found this out. And what I love about that is that there's a lot of clues that tell us that. I mean, we remember that scene in episode 6 where we saw that flashback with Joanna and Tyrell, and she talked about the earrings that he gave her. Well, now we know how she got said earrings, and I think we've always seen that Joanna has always been the dominant one. Even when she was with Derek and she was having sex with him, she's always been that dominant one, and I think that for one of the, definitely she's still the dominant one right now, and I think it's definitely very interesting that we're seeing that. And she says by the end of that she received a gift, and that's how she knows that he's alive, and that's why he's been calling her, and that's when they send her this phone, because he's doing what's necessary. And Elliot asks if she talked to him, and she says that he called her last night, and he said it's impossible. She says it was just to let her know that he's okay, he has a plan, and he asks if he told her that, and she says if they haven't spoken, he's protecting her because that's what you're supposed to do. Now remember, Elliot's under the assumption that he murdered Tyrell, that Tyrell's gone, and that she's kind of just a very, I think Elliot says in the episode that she's just a grieving woman, and I think that we're kind of supposed to think that as well. But, I mean, this sounds quite legit. It definitely does not sound like she's insane. And we know that Joanna definitely isn't senile. She says that they haven't spoken. He's protecting her because that's what you're supposed to do for your partner. She says the calls come up as unknown. She's tried to have them tracked, but she's been unsuccessful. And she asks if there's something he may be able to accomplish. And Mr. Robot basically tells him that, you know, he should not be working for her, that she's the wife of the psycho who strangled a woman, the same psycho who was that close to doing that to him, and if they're around when she finds out that Tyrell is dead, then there's no telling what will happen to them. I mean, they will obviously be killed, and this definitely won't end well, and basically Elliot tells us that he's right, it's not worth it. He slides the phone back to Joanna, says that he can help her, tries to leave, but she's not letting him go away. I mean, you can definitely tell that Joanna is going to make sure that he gets this done. You know, he's blocked by Jesse. She goes to him, asks if he really wants to say no to her, and basically is forced to do what she says. And I love that we saw that. Elliot's not allowed to run away anymore. And again, that's something that I loved about last week's episode, that it really does show that Elliot's now back into this world. You know, the mask was the prison. That's what was keeping him from entering the dark world and seeing how dark and just depressing and the state that things are in. You know, he didn't realize the extent of really what was going on, but now that he is pulled into it, he really can't do anything. He kind of just has to go along what she's doing, and I love seeing Elliot throughout most of this episode be completely held hostage in, you know, Joanna's house. That was very interesting. So after retrieving the tape, Cisco found a man, Vincent, on the couch, we find out, and he's now brought him back to the apartment, and he came from, and Darlene and him are arguing about, he says that he thought he was one of her guys, and she tries to wake him up, but to no avail, and she asks Cisco what's wrong with him. He says he has no idea. She asks where the others are. He says that he was the only one there and has no idea who he is. She says that he was one of the DC guys who did the Capitol Hill job, and he says they have to get him to a hospital. She says that there will be no hospitals, and that's something that she just can't risk. You know, she can't go to a hospital because she knows that people are watching them, people will be, you know, she just doesn't want to go there. And how do they know he doesn't have a tracker on him or a bug? She pulls up his shirt, and he's literally just bleeding all over, and he says he's gonna die. All they have to do is drop him off in an ER. She says he knows her face and her name. She says he's gonna wake up to a drip of morphine, and she can't risk him talking, and basically is just thinking of doing the same thing she did to, you know, Susan Jacobs. She's gonna do the same thing. She's gonna drug him, and he knew what he was getting himself into. He says they don't get him help right now, he will die, and they can't really risk that. I mean, obviously, they already have one death on their hands. You know, she's killed Susan, and they still have the death in their hands. They'll never be able to really come back from that. But, you know, if they want to continue to protect their cover, they need to help this guy, and basically, how did that not compute for her? She says their focus is finding Trent and Mobley, but Cisco's at the point where he thinks they actually might be dead, and honestly, I don't think that he's wrong about that. And he basically tells her she's completely lost it, and I love that Cisco basically just tells us what we've been thinking this entire season, that she wants to act like she's on top of things, but she's not, and I think that really sums up this entire episode. Everyone wants to feel that they're in control, and they're clearly not. I mean, what has been the quote of the season? Control is just an illusion, and that's very much true in this episode. None of these characters are in control of their lives right now, and Darlene especially, I think, has the rudest awakening out of everyone this episode. And she's not there, she's not a leader, she's not special, and yes, they did the hack, but fumbled their way into this ridiculous freak accident, and that's not leading, and it's time to drop the charade. This was all part of the plan, and she needs to wake the fuck up. And he says there's no way she can justify letting him die. It's just not going to end well. Obviously, it's just going to make her look worse on her part, and what I love about this is that Darlene has been someone that I have really enjoyed a lot more this season. I really loved her in Season 1, but I found her as more of a sidekick to Elliot. I didn't really see her as a leader. But this season, she's had to step up and do more. But now that Elliot's back in, she's realizing that really none of this has been her. This has just been her basically just doing all the work that Elliot couldn't do. And I think she very much realizes that here. We'll get to that in a little bit later. But Carly Chaikin just... I said that her Emmy scene was her killing Susan. That should be her Emmy nomination scene. Her Emmy winning scene is a scene that comes up later in this episode. We'll get into that, though. So, Dom and the NYPD are investigating the crime scene at the Smart House. She goes to Agent Yang, asks her if she can believe the house, and Dom said it's real nice, and they should seriously consider putting their money back together. Yang says it should be on the market soon. Dom asks what happened, and Yang takes her through what happened. Dom says that she's not entirely sure why she was called here, and Yang gives her a paper from someone who was seen there and says him and another male were spotted around 10 p.m. getting into a cab, and the description matches the person in her codename case. And Dom asks if he was there tonight and asks if they found the cab, and if this really was the guy who didn't, why didn't they just burn the house, and what was the thought process there? And Yang says that director Comey's taking a more aggressive strategy on everything after the shit hit the fan, that video. And again, I think Dom's realizing that she kind of needs to step up here. I mean, clearly that the NYPD, they've been very low-key about this, and they need to not be so low-key anymore. So we're then taken to the streets in New York at night, and it's a harrowing scene. I mean, just seeing the dark streets, seeing, like, the garbage burnings, seeing just utter chaos everywhere. Elliot asks if this is the future that he was fighting for. I mean, we remember that scene in episode 4 where he imagined that future where everyone's together. And I really do feel this episode confirms that future is never going to happen. I think it's something that Elliot wants, but he's never going to get it. And he says the system is frozen in limbo. He wonders that they've lost the fight, and maybe wars aren't meant to be won. Maybe they're meant to be continuous, and maybe Ray had it right all along. And Mr. Robot says these people are certifiable. They should be going home and not working with these whack jobs. Elliot says that she's a grieving wife who wants to believe her husband is alive, and Elliot asks who he thinks is making those calls, and Mr. Robot says that her husband's the most wanted person in the country, and a ton of people hate her just by association. And we know this. I mean, we saw that scene in the prison episode where she got pig's blood dumped on her just because she was Tyrell's wife. I mean, no one really knows the extent of what she's doing, but they do know that she's associated with Tyrell, and obviously Tyrell is kind of like a Edward Snowden right now. He's untraceable, and anyone that's connected to him is obviously going to be ridiculed and hated and just have a very bad rep around anyone, really, which is kind of sad to see. I mean, Joanna, like I said, she's just guilty by association, but at the same time, she kind of put it on herself, and I think it's really Joanna kind of facing the music and realizing that this kind of was her fault. So Elliot says they need to stop at a micro center. Mr. Robot says they're only making one stop to his apartment, and Elliot says the cops confiscated everything and that it'll be weeks before he can get it back, and if he wants this done tonight, he needs hardware, because remember, all of his stuff is gone. He needs to get all this new equipment, and just seeing that, I'm like, I don't know if he's actually going to make it. Like, I really did not know what was going to happen here. And that's the middle of this episode. This episode is completely unpredictable. I had no idea where it was going throughout the entire episode. The show in general, like, the season has been really unpredictable for me, at least. So Dom goes to Santiago, gives him the picture of Cisco that Ali found, and this is the sketch that someone gave them just now, and they're from two different witnesses, but she's convinced that it's definitely the same guy, and we know it is, and says they have fresh evidence on him. He's not tainted, and Santiago says they're going to put out a bolo, and she says if he does that, the Dark Army will kill them. If the sketch gets on the news, he'll be as good as dead, and she says that they won't let one of their own be known by law enforcement like that. As it is now, they might already know that they already lost Sanel Markish, and they can't let it happen again. I mean, they've already suffered enough. We know that, obviously, what they're going through. We know the attack they had in China, and she just doesn't want that to happen again. He says that they're going to the media for this one. They're going to use the photo, and says the whole slow roll she's been trying has been working, and now it's time to embrace the Bureau's new direction. And he then makes a call, says he has Agent Thomas looking into cab companies, and they have a lead as to where he went, and she needs to find a way to hook up with him, because obviously she needs to find Cisco, she needs to track him down, and I thought there was a very good motivation in this episode. Now, of course, there is stuff going on with Angela, but we'll get into that a little bit later, because again, that's a character we don't see till she really needs to be in the episode, which I thought was actually really well done the way they did that. So Elliot's at Micro Center, tells us that this is a cryptocurrency regulated by Evil Corp. The hypocrisy isn't surprising, and Elliot buys a bunch of new computers and phones, and Mr. Robot says that even if he does track the call from some cranky anchor down the street, when he gets the info, place the call far away like another country far. He buys more stuff, then gets a call from unknown, realizes it's the one that Joanna gave him, and he answers it, and Rami Malek in this scene just goddamn was he so good. He hears breathing, and that seems to be in the store, and the look on his face, just realizing that holy shit, this could actually be Tyrell. And suddenly Mr. Robot just disappears. So this obviously gets him very suspicious. He doesn't really know what's going on here, but clearly Mr. Robot has disappeared here. So Cisco and Darlene have decided to go to the hospital, and I like that Cisco actually was able to convince her here. Cisco is going through the transcript of what Darlene heard on the record conversation. He asked what Elliot has to do with stage 2, and she says that she was hoping that he would tell her. He says he could have just dropped Vincent off at the door. She didn't have to come, and she says she couldn't just leave him, and she had to be here. Says that he was right back there. She's not special, and like I said, Carly Chankin, this to me if the scene with her torturing Susan Jacobs was her Emmy nomination scene, this is her Emmy winning scene. She was just incredible in this scene. I love the way this was done. We find out so much about Darlene just in this very long 5-minute monologue. It's stuff that I don't think we knew before, and I really did love that. She talks about it. He's the one with the plan, the ones that they're taking seriously, and Ellie goes back to Joanna, and Darlene says she always thought it was crazy they got away with this. She thought there was something special about her that made it happen, but it wasn't her, Mobley, Trent, or Romero. It was him, and it's always been. And I think that goes right back to the scene we saw where Mobley and Trent met with Darlene. Again, everything she did was stuff that Ellie told her to do. None of this was her own. And she said that when she was 5, their parents took them to Coney Island, and it was her dad's idea of Alderson family vacation. Ellie, meanwhile, is going to work. Jesse asks what he's doing. Ellie says making a high-powered antenna that he needs to piggyback off someone else's Wi-Fi. Darlene says that she remembers looking up at the roller coaster thing was the highest thing she's ever seen, and Ellie then gets at the roller coaster, and basically Ellie then gets a text from someone named Claudia Kincaid, who just goes by the name A, and we don't know who that is. I thought it was just anonymous. I didn't really know what was going on here, but Darlene says that she wasn't tall enough to go on it, so Edward went with Elliot, and she had to wait with their mom. And she says she does remember what happened, but somehow she got lost, but unlike other kids her age, she actually wasn't scared. She loved it. All of a sudden, she felt someone grab her around the waist and pick her up, and it was this old woman. She was skinny and tall, and she had this smeared, almost pink lipstick, and she held on to her tights, and Ellie gets on the computer. Darlene says she thought about screaming, but she didn't because she didn't want to. She actually felt like this woman cared about her, and Ellie puts the flash drive in the computer. He opens up the photos. Darlene says they went to Nathan's, and she says that they could have whatever she wanted, something her parents never asked her, which just that low-key detail, realizing that she never ever, got what she wanted. And honestly, if we remember the scene in episode 6 where it was the fake sitcom, even in that, Darlene wasn't really respected. Anything, she asked her mother just burned her with a cigarette, and I think that part of the story, that was the reality, that Darlene never really was respected by her family. It was always Elliot's, and she always kind of felt like the outsider, and she says it was the first time she ever really felt special. They start driving to her house. She remembers thinking that something wasn't right, but she just looked at her lipstick and let it happen. So Elliot sees a file about law enforcement legal compliance guide. Darlene says that they got to her house. She showed her the room. It had one of those beds with the curtains around it, and she did feel like a princess, and she felt like this was her new home and her new life, and she didn't even have to see her parents again. A wish that she had that came true. And Elliot finds a number for the NYPS main fax line, and not NYPS, NYPD, I don't know why I put NYPS. Darlene says she went to sleep hoping this wasn't all a dream. She was just going to wake up in her old bed. Sure enough, the next morning she was still there, but then the police barged in, and when they took her downstairs, there were cops everywhere. She never got to see that woman again, and then they put her into their car, took her home, and basically that's how her life is today. But she still wonders what her life would have been like if she had stayed there. But if she had, she wouldn't have Elliot. And what I love about that scene is that this isn't just Darlene unraveling. I think this is her just realizing that she's never really been in control, and she's kind of okay with it, that Elliot's kind of been the one that's always protected her. He's always stuck up for her. He's always been helping her all along, and she's really never seen it that way. And I think it's interesting that we saw that here. I really did love the way that scene was done. I thought that was incredible. I think, like I said, Carly Chaikin just absolutely killed in that scene. I really think that is her Emmy scene. Out of all the scenes, I think that's the scene they really should submit for her Emmy, really, because she was just incredible there. And I don't really think we knew any of this about Darlene before. I mean, when we're introduced to Darlene in Season 1, we initially think that she's just this confident, bitchy girl, basically. We don't really know who she is. We just think she's kind of confident and kind of bitchy and very sarcastic. But I think we're kind of realizing that she likes to play confident when really deep down she really isn't as confident. She, I think, knows that she isn't in power. She's having this rude awakening, and she's realizing that it's not necessarily a bad thing, because while she's not in danger, Elliot is. And she likes having Elliot by her side. She doesn't know where she'd be without him, and I really did love the way that scene was done. I thought that was really good. Like I said, Carly Chaikin absolutely killed it there, and it's one of the few reasons why I think she's had such a better season than she did last year. I loved Darlene last year. I just don't think she's had the extent of stuff she had this season, because she really has had some incredible stuff. So, basically, we then go back to Elliot, and Jesse says that there are a lot of guys working on this, and none of them can figure it out. Elliot prints a police report. Jesse asks what it's for. Elliot says that it's for impersonating an NYPD officer. All cell carriers have a law enforcement hotline. Instead of hacking the carrier, if the situation's urgent enough, you can just ask them to track a block call for you. So he downloads some codes and then gets another text from Claudia, who says they need to meet now. Jesse asks if it's done. Elliot says not yet, only a few minutes for the spoof fax to go through, and it needs to propagate through their system, and no one in the world uses fax anymore except for cops. And Jesse says that half of it wants to be him and half of him doesn't. And he says before working for the Welks, he had a list of clients, all of them eccentric in one form or another, and Elliot tells that now he wants to have a heart-to-heart, and focusing on us helps drown him out. And he says it's like talking to someone in a crowded restaurant, all the other voices fade into the background, and somehow our brain is able to code the components of that complex auditory space. And he asks us if we can feel it, and says it gives us time to talk. And we get this incredible scene, which is just this really cool tracking shot. That was really cool. He asks if Mr. Robot's MIA because he's afraid to talk about, afraid of what he might find out when he's done with this hack. He asks why that phone call freaked him out. Could he have found out about Tyrell? And the last thing he wanted was to go back home, and there must be something there that he needs, and he's been bringing it up since we left prison. And he tells us to look and asks us if we see anything, but there doesn't seem to be anything. And I like, again, that we can't help him here. I've always thought that was interesting, the way that we, the audience, he always asks us to help him, but we never can. I think it's interesting. I think the difference here is that Elliot's realizing that I think he knows he can trust us, but he also knows that we just can't really help him in this situation. You know, he kept this huge secret from us, and now we just can't really help him in this situation, which I found very interesting. So Darlene and Cisco are then with the doctor, who asks him if they have any idea what happened to Vincent. She says they went over to his place, found him like that, and the doctor says he's on a rest operator. They're going to do a CT scan and run some other tests, and they should know about it in an hour or so. Cisco says they got an hour to kill. They go for a bite to eat, and Elliot then pretends to be this detective named Richard Hannigan from the NYPD and asks to make sure they can confirm they got the facts. And once he's on, he finds a location, and Jesse asks if that's where the phone is right now. Elliot says it's within 12 meters, and Elliot takes a picture of it and asks if it's him, and basically he's thinking that it could actually be him. The FBI then bursts into Cisco's apartment, and this is where the episode gets insane. The last 10 or so minutes of this episode, I think, might just be the most intense stuff we have ever had on Mr. Robot. I mean, this was just crazy. The way that this was done, I thought this was incredible. I love the way they did this, and like I said, I haven't been this riveted, I've been riveted all season, but I haven't been this riveted, honestly, probably since the big reveal last season. I love the way this scene was done. This was just incredible, and, I mean, I really think this was just crazy. Jesse tells Elliot he wouldn't be calling from that house. We then see an ID for Francis Shaw, clearly Cisco's real name. The nurse then sees on the news the sketch of Cisco, realized that he was behind the F59 attack. Darlene and Cisco are at a diner. Elliot gets another message from Claudia who says she needs to meet him right away. Darlene tells Cisco she has money stashed in it for the canal, and she needs to make sure that Vincent's alright, then wipe the place down and fold. They can make them target them from afar. For more intel on Trent and Mobley, Cisco says she knows they can't leave. She says they don't own them, they play by the rules, and those fuckers still hit Trent and Mobley, and she says she's so sick of always worrying about switching cabs and phones and trains, always looking behind. He tells her to calm down, and you can tell she kind of just doesn't want this to be her life anymore. She's at the point where she wants to just be away from it. You know, she feels that she's done enough, she doesn't want to do this anymore, and I like the way that Cisco is in agreement with her here, because he himself also doesn't want to be involved. And Dom and Santiago are at the hospital. Dom's trying to figure out where Cisco could be. Santiago says they're reviewing the security footage and to let her finish. The doctor explains to them where they were. She says she told them to come back in an hour. Santiago suspects they saw the bolo and probably hiding, and it might take some time, but they'll get him. And just like I said, the way this was done, the score in the background, by the way, was incredible. I really want to find out what that score was, because it just completely propelled the scene. It made it so unpredictable. And then we see Angela's on the subway, who we haven't seen all episode, and Ellie gets on it, and we realize that she actually was Claudia Kincaid. She had to cover up who she really was. Now, how she was able to get into Elliot's phone, I don't really know, but I think there was definitely, Tyrell's phone, I don't really know, but I think this was really cool nonetheless. He says he got her message and is sorry she took so long to get there. Basically, everything we've been leading up to all season. I know everyone's been talking about that really the climax this season is going to be a confrontation between Angela and Elliot, and that is absolutely the case. I love that we have been telling these three separate stories, and now they've all kind of come together. There's kind of been three stories going on. You've had Elliot's, you've had Angela's, you've had Joanna's. They're all coming out in this episode. They're all coming together, and Angela just really finally gets a chance to interrogate Elliot, and it's really the first scene these two actually have together, because they had that scene in the prison, but this is the first time they can actually do something face-to-face. And he says he got her message, is sorry it took so long to get there. He asks what's wrong, and she just out of the blue, just asks him why he started F Society. I'm freaking out at this point, realizing that she knows about F Society. He says he didn't want to involve her, and this is Elliot's worst nightmare. I mean, this is the one thing that he feared. He told us from the first episode, he's told us that Angela is one of the good ones, and he's wanted anything but her to get involved with this, and now she is involved, and he doesn't really know what to do anymore. And she tells him an FBI agent came to her place. Dom then waits for Cisco and Darlene to get back. Cisco tells Darlene to just sit there and chill a minute, and they'll come up with something, and sometimes the best decision isn't making one, and she agrees. Dom then goes to the doctor, asks why it took her so long to call it in when the TV's right there. She says she didn't do anything wrong, she's just trying to figure something out. The doctor says probably because Janice turns into the news when her shift starts. Dom says she didn't see it, the TV, they're coming back, and they probably didn't go too far. She goes out to find them, and she's gonna go basically on this manhunt, which is incredible the way this was done. And honestly, I know people haven't liked Dom's character, but it is something that you definitely can say about Dom, is that when Dom wants something done, she'll get it done, and she really is one of the only ones that is thinking realistically and really is actually getting this done. You know, she wants to close this case once and for all and get away from this, but Elliot then tells Angela that he can fix this. She says she's gonna confess. She already called her lawyer. She's on her way to meet her now, and she says that she can't keep pretending like this is going to go away. They can't beat them, and I love that she's coming to this realization that she, again, is someone that is not really in power. I mean, we've known those scenes she's had with Price, but I think that was just her trying to feel good about herself. I think she always has known that she's not really in power, but she's always tried to get something from it, and I think she's realizing that it hasn't really done her any good, and no matter what they do, they will always lose to them. And she says she's going to tell them that she planted the feminist cell, and she says she would never involve any of them, so she's just going to take the blame, but sooner or later this will all catch up to him. And I think that is a perfect setup for not only the finale but the rest of the show in general, because at some point this is going to get back to Elliot. They're going to realize that he's behind this, and there's no way that he's not going to, you know, end up guilty for this, and we don't really know what's going to happen, but I thought that really was incredible, and just Angela basically telling him the hard truth that he doesn't want to hear. I love that it was Angela telling this, because Angela's one of the only people that we know will get through to Elliot. If Angela tells him something, he will listen to her. Those two have been close forever, and he'll do whatever he can for her. And again, I just love the way that was done. Cisco and Darlene then stay in the restaurant and eat. Elliot asks how he's supposed to protect everyone he cares about when every step he takes puts them in greater danger. He says this was his plan. He hid in the cage while everyone else took the risk. And again, I thought that was just incredible. Angela then says they have to talk to each other in the subway. It's a long way from getting high. Watching Back to the Future 2, he says they never did get around to doing that, and just finding out that they never got to do this memory, it just really shows the direction their lives have taken. They've been so separate from each other for almost a year that they just really haven't been able to communicate much, and basically, it's all now catching up to them. Dom then goes to find Cisco and Darlene and asks the woman if she's seen them anywhere. She says she hasn't. Angela asks if he remembers when she found him at the Queen's Museum. He was pacing and screaming at the staff. She couldn't see whoever she said he was seeing. She asks if it was Mr. Robot, because remember, he told her about Mr. Robot in episode 5, and then two, or was it someone else? And he says he doesn't remember that at all. She says she doesn't know if he started all this because of him, but whatever he is, he can't work with him, and he can't trick himself into thinking he can. And I think she really is right. I mean, obviously, Mr. Robot, he has a whole entire different agenda, and there's definitely something he's came from Elliot for a reason, but we don't really know what that reasoning is. And I like that she's saying, look, you just can't trust him. I mean, obviously, this is something that he probably should have known, but for some reason, Mr. Robot didn't tell him, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. Dawn then asks the woman where she would go if she was going to eat. The woman tells her to go 5 blocks, and she runs to find them. And the second this happens, I'm like, something's going to happen. Something's definitely going to happen here. Angela tells Elliot that he should probably get off there. He tells us that he doesn't want to leave her. They hug, and then finally, I think the moment we've been leading up to all season, we've hinted about it through the entire season. It's finally happened. The T actually ends up kissing her, and this is something that, again, Mr. Robot has told him not to do. I mean, the entire season he said, do not get close to Angela. Angela's, working with them. She's not someone you can trust. He's not listening to Mr. Robot anymore. He's going to do what he feels is right, because he knows that Mr. Robot, there's some sort of other plan he has, and he wants to be in control of his life. And I think him making that move and just kissing Angela like that is us seeing that Elliot is going to take matters into his own hands, and he's not going to let Mr. Robot do things for him anymore, which I think is interesting that we saw. So he walks off to go back home. She watched him leave feeling very concerned, and then we see these two people staring at her. Now, we don't know who they are, and these are just two random people that saw her and knew what she was talking about and were listening in, and now they might expose her, or if this is someone that maybe worked at Evil Corp or someone she knows. We don't really know what's going on there, and I like that. I like that we only saw Angela in that one scene. That's all we really need to see, and I think that's going to be very interesting to see where that goes in the finale. But then we get the stuff I know you guys want me to talk about, because Dom does make it to the restaurant, tells Santiago to send all units to Watson 6th Avenue. She goes into the restaurant. We see two people on a motorcycle who I'm willing to assume are the Dark Army, because we know obviously what Santiago said. The guy gets off, literally shoots everyone in there, including Cisco and Darlene, which if you look at that shot, Cisco is dead. His head explodes in that shot. Darlene does duck, so Darlene's obviously okay, but Cisco, I think, is pretty much dead. The police get there, shoot the guy down, and Dom comes out. She says she's with the FBI, tells him not to shoot. She's already covered in blood. She's now part of this. She's now gotten herself into she's now treading to deeper waters, and we don't know what's going to happen there, but again, it leaves every character defenseless, it leaves everyone's life on the line, and it leaves me completely speechless and just completely out of words as to what actually is going to happen next week. But I think it's a perfect way to close the episode. It's the perfect stuff that Mr. Robot does, and it really does show why this show is one of the most intense things and just one of the best overall shows on TV right now. So guys, this episode was just incredible. I mean, those last 10 minutes in general, that is why I love this show. I mean, that's what this show is all about. Finally, these actions are catching up to them. I've told you guys before, the show is not going through a sophomore slump. They're just telling a different story. Everyone's been scattered doing their own thing because they felt that they've been in control. But now they're starting to realize that they're not in control and that they kind of need to take responsibility for their own actions. And it's starting with Elliot's basically realizing that he can't do what Mr. Robot is telling him to do. It's not that he thinks, he's trying to get rid of Mr. Robot, but I think he is going to try to put Mr. Robot in his place. He's definitely going to figure out what's going on there, because there's definitely something happening, and especially the fact that Mr. Robot just disappeared. There's obviously something at large that he's just not telling him. Now, what that said thing is, I don't know, but that's going to be very interesting, and I'm willing to bet, like I said, Tyrell is not dead. I know for a fact that Tyrell is not dead. I mean, how could he have answered those calls? It sounded so much like Tyrell, and especially going all the way back to that first episode. We remember that Elliot got that call from Tyrell. That couldn't have just been his imagination. I mean, I think that Tyrell definitely is alive, and there's something that Mr. Robot is trying to keep from him. He doesn't want him to know what actually happened, and we'll have to see what actually happens. I think that's going to be very interesting. This shootout, I mean, this really cannot end well for Dom. I mean, obviously, Dom thought that she had Cisco and Darlene cornered, but in the end, again, she remained completely defenseless, and what's going to happen here, the fact that she's covered in blood, the fact she knows what happened, I mean, I don't really know how this is all going to go. If she's going to get to Elliot, if she's going to be able to arrest Darlene, if she's going to get Darlene to confess what's going on. I mean, I don't really know what happens, but I think Angela really is the key to all this. This episode definitely makes it seem like Angela is going to be the one to save them all, and I think it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, not necessarily the one to save them all, but she's the one that's starting to get. She's realizing that they're just not in control, and that they need to start, basically admitting to their actions, and it starts with her confessing to what she did, and I think her and Elliot just kissing like that, it's really showing that he is willing to count on Angela, and I think, honestly, those two, do they have a future together? I honestly don't know, but I just thought that was very satisfying. It definitely went with this season, especially the fact that we've had so many scenes hinted of them getting together. I love the way that was done. I thought that was incredible, and the fact that Angela now knows all this stuff, the fact that he's had Mr. Robot, the fact that he is with F. Society. What is that going to mean for her? That honestly really scares me. We know when the Dark Army finds out something you don't want them to and that you know too much, they just straight up kill you. So I'm really worried for Angela, honestly. I'm really worried for her going in this finale. I honestly could see her getting killed off. I don't want to see that happen, but I'm very worried that it's going to happen. Definitely, we'll have to see what happens with that, but I feel like she's going to. It just seems like it's too close of a call. It seems like, you know, if she confesses, then the show's kind of not over, but I don't really know where this is going to lead us, and I like that. I like that I don't really know what's going to happen with that. Darlene, what's Darlene's condition going to be? I'm pretty sure Cisco's dead. I think I saw Cisco's head explode in that scene, but Darlene did get away, so we'll have to see what happens with that. Is she going to be able to protect them any longer? I don't think she's going to, and I like that Darlene's coming to this realization, like I said, that she's no longer in control, that she's someone that kind of just has to face the music and realize that everything she's done has been because Elliot's told her to, and I think it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. As far as Price is someone that wants to definitely be in control. He's someone that wants this power, you know, he wants to be the most powerful man in the room, but he's simply nothing more than that. He might be the most powerful man in the room, but he's not the most powerful man in the world, and I think he needs to realize that there is definitely a larger party at hand. He knows that. One is White Rose, but who is the other one? Elliot, possibly? Tyrell? I mean, there's definitely someone else, and I like that he said there's only two people. We know that one's obviously White Rose, but who could be that second party? We don't really know who that is, and that's something I think is going to be very interesting, is who that is. Who is Vincent? What is he tied to? That guy definitely is bad news. I don't trust him. I don't know what's happening there, but I think he was associated with the Dark Army in some form. I just don't know what form, but I feel like he was. It seems like the more people we meet, the more people join the Dark Army, and it kind of makes sense, especially when you're in this depression-like state of the world. It kind of makes sense why people are starting to revolt and go to these sort of like terrorist groups, because the only way they can get money, it's the only way they can get what they want, and that's really what we're going to see. I mean, Price saying that there could be a World War III, I honestly could see that happening, because things are just so dire and things are just so bad in the world that I don't really know how these characters are going to get out of this, and I really don't know what's going to happen next week. I'm just spitballing things at this point. This show, I love the way this scene was done. I thought, you know, just the way this episode was done, the amount of shit that happened. I have no idea what's happening next week's finale, which is also 2 hours, and I can't wait to see what happens with that. But anyways, guys, thank God it's 2 hours, because there is a lot of shit to cover, definitely. But anyways, guys, let me know what you guys saw this episode. I literally could just go on and on asking so many questions, but I'm just not going to, because I don't want this video to be 40 minutes long. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. Let me know what you guys thought of this episode overall. What do you think is going to happen in next week's finale? Like I said, I really have no idea. But that's my review. Hope you guys enjoyed. We'll see you guys in my next one, which will be for the series premiere of the new FX show, Better Things. And I will see you guys for that. Okay, bye.